Tonight on Greater Boston, CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Laura Coates joins me on her new book, Just Pursuit, a black prosecutor's fight for fairness. Plus, the local woman bucking the trend of people leaving the emergency healthcare industry, rather running to it, in another edition of our GBH News Big Quit series. And then later, a look back at my recent conversation with two co-founders of the annual Winter Walk, which raises awareness and funds to satisfy one ambitious goal: ending homelessness in Boston. It's happening this Sunday. A cornerstone of Joe Biden's 2020 campaign was his promise to reform the criminal justice system. The then candidate promised, among other things, the end of private prisons, no more mandatory minimums, decriminalizing marijuana, expunging records for related convictions, in great part because of their impact on poor people and people of color. And at first, things seemed promising. Biden's first week in office included an executive order scaling back the use of private prisons. A few months later, his Justice Department suspended federal executions. But since then, there hasn't been much more, and a year into his term, many are frustrated. In December, several activist groups wrote a letter to Biden's Justice Department criticizing what they said has been a, quote, doubling down on the failed policies of the past administration instead of charting a bold new course. But as my next guest has found out over the course of her career, the justice system's injustices run deep. Laura Coates is a former federal prosecutor serving as Assistant U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, trial attorney in the DOJ Civil Rights Division. She, of course, is now a CNN senior legal analyst and the author of a great book, Just Pursuit, a black prosecutor's fight for fairness. Laura, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be. Thank you.
So for people who like to ease into their reading, this is not the book for them. It's only a few pages in when you talk about your supervisor approaching you right after you've won a case, and he utters 4 words, "We got another one." What did he mean by those 4 words?
Well, I'd like to extend a benefit of the doubt and think maybe he meant just a conviction, but there was something about it that really felt like an indoctrination. And the reality was that over a long course of the career, it was really about the us versus thems. And that is always very problematic to think about when you're a public servant. And when you say you're on behalf of the people of the United States, that includes the defendants oftentimes. As odd as that might seem to people as a prosecutor, you must ensure that their rights are also preserved and protected. And so hearing that just was sort of the one of the final straws that broke this particular camel's back, and the notion of thinking how these battles of allegiances we often all have, of having one's lived experience, every facet of your identity, often be in extraordinary tension with the directives of the office and the demands of the justice system.
Your book is a series of examples of racism infecting virtually every crack and crevice of the justice system. I don't think people will be surprised so much about racism directed at defendants because of the color of their skin. They might be surprised at racism directed at lawyers because of the color of their skin. You experienced it. Were you surprised?
I have to tell you, it was very startling for me to go from the Civil Rights Division in particular, where it's almost a foregone conclusion whose champion you are. The idea of thinking about trying to preserve the rights and protect the rights of those who have been marginalized, those who've had their rights infringed, particularly in the voting rights context. And then even under that same umbrella of the justice system, becoming a criminal prosecutor really for many felt as though I had betrayed that same community, even though the victims were overwhelmingly Black and brown. The idea that I was standing in a place as a Black woman where the stereotypical man, the white man, would actually be, the perception was that there was no opportunity to really be, on the one hand, a civil rights proponent and also a prosecutor. Those two things could not actually meet up, they believed. And especially as a Black woman, that was often challenged as to whose side I was really on. And of course, we all know that this system that we have is really a legal system aspiring to be a justice system, much like this country is still aspiring to be what it says it is on paper. But the idea of having this fallacy that Black and brown people must occupy but one role in a criminal courtroom, that a defendant or perhaps defense counsel, I think, needs to be disrupted. And frankly, those who are proponents of civil rights should be everywhere where power can be wielded and discretion exercised.
You know, to follow up on your thoughts, to make the criminal justice system into a real justice system, it seems, at least so far as I mentioned, Congress doesn't appear ready to do it. Most state legislatures surely don't. It seems to me that the next stage of reform is really on the ground level. Here in Boston, until a month ago, when she was promoted to be the U.S. attorney in the first roll call vote on a U.S. attorney, I think, in decades. Rachel Rollins was a Suffolk County DA, and she, in her campaign, talked about 15 low-level crimes that where the rebuttable presumption was she would not prosecute them. There are a number of progressive district attorneys on the county level around the country. That is where the next layer of reform, if it's to come, is going to come from, isn't it?
You know, it is, I think, in many respects, but I want to be cautious. Of course, I was not a prosecutor who worked under an elected official. I was certainly had political appointees as U.S. attorneys. And there is a different calculus involved for those who are campaigning and those who, of course, are beholden to the electorate. But the premise is really the same. And that, the idea that prosecutors and the government is expected to be perfect and no time to do so or have resources that are limited shows you that sometimes prosecutors are prioritizing cases that the average person who might be a victim or might be a citizen in the country or somebody who's watching this might take issue with. How could you not pursue this crime? It's a crime. A crime is a crime is a crime in a nation of laws. And I think it really is prudent for prosecutors to start to really be open about the fact that even then when they're not elected, we make judgment calls day in and day out about the cases we're going to prosecute and the ones we're not going to. And that cost-benefit analysis might really surprise people, but with limited resources, with the idea of the priorities set and handed down oftentimes from the AG on down, these decisions can oftentimes be disruptive and really disturbing, but nonetheless necessary.
Well, prosecutorial discretion, a term that I think the average person on the street has no conception of, but it's there. Speaking of discretion, though, in a incredibly moving part of your book, you felt you had no discretion as a lawyer when a crime victim came to your attention, was illegally in the country. You became aware of the fact that ICE, or at least some immigration authorities, were going to come arrest and deport him. You didn't warn him. How hard was that, and why did you make the choice you did?
I mean, it's excruciating of a choice, but it's also excruciating, of course, for the people who are faced with that proposition of either report a crime committed against them or remain in the shadows to be further exploited or victimized. I mean, imagine if it was a sexual assault victim. In this case, it was a victim of a car theft, but imagine an even more serious crime. And we as a society want people to come forward and say what has happened, and having that difficult, if not impossible choice of either say and be deported or be quiet and be victimized. And for me, the protocol in the office required me to have to alert the authorities, essentially treat this person who'd been in the country for decades, had not so much as sneezed in the direction of a police officer since arriving in this country and remaining illegally, but was equated with those who were criminals for which we do seek accountability for the nature of their actual crimes. And there is a real tension there in terms of that battle of allegiance. I can tell you, I write about it in the book throughout, that my moral compass sometimes pointed one direction, but the directives pointed another. And that's why I often say, which is very counterintuitive to those who don't know the system, that sometimes the pursuit of justice can create injustice. And I'm very particular about the notion that I was a prosecutor fighting for fairness, because justice can so often be elusive for instances like this.
You know, you made that choice despite where your moral compass was. You're probably not familiar with a local case here where a judge about a year ago decided to help someone who was undocumented in her courthouse evade federal immigration authorities who were there to snatch him. She's been indicted for that. Her case, criminally indicted. Her case is on appeal. What's your reaction to what she did?
I have such a heavy sigh when I think about that, because I remember those moments when I had colleagues who said, tell him to run, Coates. I couldn't have that on my conscience. Others who said, well, you could do that, but you'd be aiding and abetting and interfering with the proper authorities. And you could be disbarred, and that would be the best case scenario, to be disbarred in that circumstance. You know, others who said, look, you're a prosecutor. What do you care? The law is the law. And if the law was broken, you have clean hands. No one else does in this scenario. But I tell you, it was a really heart-wrenching decision, and one that I think about. I'm not familiar with the case you're speaking about, but I can only imagine what that was like for a judge to see unfairness in that way and make that particular decision at great personal peril and consequence to herself. But it just goes to show you, and I write about in the book, oftentimes if you find yourself looking at our system and saying, well, what else could you do? There are no other alternatives that don't have those consequences, then therein lies the opportunities for reform, because we have to be a country, in my opinion, that actually understands that fairness has got to be as much a part of the justice system as we profess that it is. And what an unbelievable choice she made. And I wonder if she regrets it, given the great personal peril.
But fairness obviously has to be the goal. Are you a hopeful kind of person, or are you of the belief that bias and racism are so baked into the criminal justice system that the best we can do is chip away at the edges?
I am an eternal optimist, and I'm very glass half full, not because I'm naive or have rose-colored glasses, but because what is the alternative? To resign ourselves to the status quo and just say, this is the way it's always going to be? I mean, the only reason you think about inertia, things tend to stay in motion until they're disrupted by some outside external force. Well, I think that we have to have optimism in a sense, in a skeptical way, but a healthy way, but optimism to really disrupt that inertia and really be able to change things. Nothing in our country has gotten done because we turned a blind eye to an issue, or because it was overwhelming, or because the task was really Sisyphean in so many ways. We really have to make sure that the optimism is not just pie in the sky, but actually boots on the ground, to ensure that there is no longer a chasm between what ought to be right, what is, what's lawful, and what is not.
I'm a cup totally empty kind of guy, so I would like a little of you to wear off. So speaking of injustices, before you go, I want to bring one more injustice up, and it all stems from this moment.
Who would be a good, solid host of the show if you retired?
There is an attorney, Laura Coates. She's African American, and she appears on some of the cable news shows from time to time.
You may recognize that guy as the late Alex. What happened? What happened? We watched Mayim Bialik and Ken Jennings. I haven't seen you hosting that show, Laura Coates, and Alex Trebek apparently wanted you. What happened?
Well, man, when you see him speaking, don't you just miss him? I certainly miss seeing his face, hearing him, hearing his questions, having that banter at the podiums for all of the different contestants. Wow, I don't think he'll ever be able to truly be replaced, nor do we really think he can be. And I got to tell you, whenever I hear that, I'm so humbled, because I'm a lifelong Jeopardy fan. But you know what? They didn't give me the opportunity to do so. But you know what? My calling is still the same. It is to ask the right questions, give the right answers, and keep my community out of jeopardy. And that's what I'll do.
You are one hopeful woman. Great to meet you, Laura Coates. Congratulations on a terrific book.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
The book again is Just Pursuit, a black prosecutor's fight for fairness. Even before the pandemic, ambulance workers were in short supply, and since the start of COVID, more have left the field. But at least one woman is bucking that trend, as we hear in another edition of our ongoing series, The Big Quit.
I'm the adrenaline junkie, I'm the roller coaster person. I like to be different places all the time and always moving. My name's Kat Benoit, I'm 47 years old, and I'm an EMT. Love, do you have any pain right now? I used to be a senior research administrator. I help scientists and researchers obtain funding.
As the U.S. is dealing with the worst pandemic in a century.
Once we were all kind of in quarantine and at home and then watching the news.
Some hospitals are already struggling to manage
a highly contagious infectious disease.
Non-stop, literally.
I felt this feeling of just absolute hopelessness. I wanted to do something so bad, and then I thought, how can I help? When I grew up, my family were always giving to other people, always the first one to say, hey, I'll help you do that. You can bring him to some of the guys at work. I think I was trying to kind of fulfill that in my other role as an administrator, but I never really wanted to sit behind a desk. I think the pandemic gave me the push.
Fortunately, I have the back, thank you.
Emergency medicine really spoke to me. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna enroll in this EMT class and let's just see what happens. I was working full-time and doing the EMT course at night, and then I applied to Cataldo, and they hired me. The first time you go out there and you have a patient and they're sick, it's just, it's very nerve-wracking. All right, that has stopped a little bit, honey. But then as time goes on, you build your confidence in yourself. P3, we're at the general. So for a while, I was doing both jobs. And I was finding that I couldn't wait to go to work as an EMT. Don't feel any chest pain, leg pain, arm pain. I was working between 80 and 90 hours, and I thought, well, something kind of has to give.
We are on hour 18 of our shift, have been going nonstop today.
I was scared. It was a drastic pay cut. And then I thought, I'm either gonna wake up and I'm gonna be 80 years old and think, wow, I should have done that, or I'm just gonna go do it. Nothing that we learned clinically at school could have prepared me for what we actually see on the street. There's just such a wide, huge range of illnesses and things that happen to people. EMS workers are extremely compassionate. We're doing the absolute best that we can. We're helping someone on that worst day.
All right, love, I'm just gonna put this on your arm, okay?
It's exciting. I look forward to going in, and you have no idea what's gonna happen. Best decision I ever made.
You can follow The Big Quit stories at gbhnews.org/The Big Quit, as well as GBH Radio 89.7 and here on GBH2. You can also contact us at gbhnews.org/The Big Quit to share your story. Issues surrounding homelessness in Boston have been getting a lot more attention in recent months, with discussions about mass and caste featured prominently in the mayoral election and beyond. And an event this Sunday is aiming to raise that awareness even more and money to help. The annual Winter Walk is a 2-mile walk around the city that always takes place during the coldest month of the year. It's an opportunity to walk in the shoes of and alongside some of the far too many men, women, and children who've experienced homelessness in Boston. People like Bob.
They look at you and, they say, oh, he's homeless, he's a druggie, he's a drunk. A lot of these people, like myself, we're just people that fell on hard times. I was living in a home, a nice apartment for 30 so what years. He died. And so the building was sold and they gave us 30 days to get out. And the next thing you know, I couldn't afford the rent.
That's a preview of a video that'll be shown at this year's Winter Walk. It's this Sunday, the 6th annual, which Marjorie Egan and I will MC. Two of the walk's co-founders, Paul English, who you may know from Kayak and Moonbeam, and Ari Barbanel, recently joined me. Ari and Paul, it's good to see you both.
Good to see you, Jim. Thanks for having us on the show again.
Pleasure. Ari, why do you do this every February?
Because there is still homelessness in our community, and we need to come together first and foremost to change our perceptions and break stigma so we can get to the bigger systemic changes.
Paul, on your website, it says ending homelessness is within our reach. Is that something you believe or something you want to believe?
It's something I believe. It just takes political will and a commitment by people to say it should be unacceptable to see people sleeping on the street. And it is a funding issue. We know that actually giving people homes and wraparound services can in many cases be cheaper than treating them in emergency rooms and with some of the interventions that are done today. But I think it's really, we just need the political will to fund housing and wraparound services.
Do you think, Paul, in a perverse sort of way, that so many more people have witnessed, either in person or on their television screen, the pain of mass and caste, that in some ways that may help speed this cause along?
Yeah, I don't like to think of unfortunate events leading to better events, but I think that might be the case. Even as I look at the intro video that you just played at the beginning of this segment, it's uncomfortable to encounter someone homeless in the street. And, we often divert our eyes away from them because it's uncomfortable confronting someone who's in such an extremely different circumstance than us. And what we're trying to do with the Winter Walk is to demystify and to meet some people and learn a little bit more about it.
And, Ari, we should delve into that a second. As I said at the top, you're not just walking for people who are homeless, you're walking with people who are homeless. I assume that's not just rhetoric, correct?
Exactly. No, there is a huge community of individuals with lived experience that walk with us, whether they're currently homeless or formerly homeless or somewhere in between. All of our partner organizations bring clients and patients and community with them. It's about being shoulder to shoulder and sharing stories, not just from the stage, but as you're walking through Copley Plaza.
You know, Marjorie Egan and you were kind enough to invite us to be part of this, and we will be. And we were talking to a coworker yesterday who said, and he is a very empathetic person, said, why are they doing this in February? And you consciously, Ari, do this in February because you want the weather to be as brutal as is humanly possible. That is correct?
Absolutely. I hope for the coldest, snowiest day.
Paul, do you worry that, I mean, I have spoken to the people who run homeless shelters who say, and not uncharitably, that we have hundreds of people who call and say, can I help on Thanksgiving? And when you say, well, we're full on Thanksgiving, thank you. How about another day? They say no. Do you worry that the homeless who are part of this effort see this as a one and done kind of thing? Great commitment on one day, then there's 364 more, and then we'll see you again next year?
Well, the good thing about it is Ari and the team who run Winter Walk every year have now raised millions of dollars to support organizations like Pine Street and Rosie's Place and many other organizations in the city. So we're making a difference in that the walkers are raising actual funds. And then I think also just forming relationships between walkers, and if not walkers and homeless people directly, between walkers and service organizations. So one of the things that I ask people to do at the end of the Winter Walk is I say, thank you for coming today and walking and learning about homelessness. But before you leave, we'd like you to join the email list of one of these service groups and agree to one meeting. And we want to make sure it extends beyond that one day, that people start to form a relationship and start to become part of this movement to figure out how can we end homelessness in Boston.
That's great. So, Ari, what happens on the 13th? Tell people, when do they show? We're going to give them registration information in a minute. What is the event?
It is a joyous celebration of wanting to end homelessness. And so we come together on Copley Plaza for the in-person version back this year. And we'll register at 8:30, get warm coffee, move to the stage where we'll hear some wonderful stories. We'll see the rest of that video with my friend Bob. And then we'll take our march through the city. Then we'll come back. It's just a brief 2 miles, and we'll have breakfast and we'll hear music. And then we will go on with our day, hopefully inspired to make change. And I'll say that if being in person is not possible or you're coming from farther away, we are doing a remote option this year as well. So we'll ask people to take their own walks or have thoughtful moments about homelessness, and we'll share some of the same resources and information. And then we'll have an online presentation at 2 p.m. on the same day as the in-person walk.
You know, as cold as it is, Ari, first with you, how do you feel on this day? This is not the first, this is the 6th, I believe. How do you feel on the day when you do this, Ari?
It's the most inspiring day of my year, I think, because of, like Paul said, that it's a moment to become part of a movement. And I do think that you leave feeling joy and feeling ready to take the next steps. So even if the next step is just that you opened the door for someone at Dunkin' Donuts who looked like they might be homeless, we got there. We got there with you. You have a little bit of a different shift in how you see things. And that's the beginning on that day in February. And we go from there.
Paul, we have 30 seconds. What's it do for you?
It connects me to people in Boston who are in need. And I think many of us in Boston's a very wealthy city, and many of us living really good lives in the city. But I think we need to be connected to those that are suffering. And the Winter Walk for me is an event where you can get connected to this community and then figure out what you can do to help.
Well, I'm really glad you're doing it, and I hope everybody watching does it with you. We're looking forward to being there. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks so much for your work.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Thank you.
Again, the walk will take place this Sunday, rain, snow, or shine, hosted by yours truly and my radio co-host, Marjorie Egan. For more info and to register, head to winterwalkboston.org. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. Adam Riley and his panel will take up the big changes state and local officials are making as COVID numbers drop and the pushback they're getting from both sides. Plus, what will it take to turn around the Boston public schools? That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe.
dawn.
New vibe.
New duo. Join me, Paris Alston,
And me, Jeremy Siegel.
for GBH's Morning Edition.
Your spot for local news and fresh insights.
To kick off your morning and inspire your day.
Weekdays from 5 to 10 on 89.7.
Today, we are going all in on a minor urban mystery here in Boston. In a typical year, the city of Boston issues about 5,000 permits for street excavations. Companies like Comcast and Verizon dig to lay cable. National Grid tears up stretches to repair gas lines. And well over 100 different private companies working for homeowners or commercial properties lay underground pipes that tap into water mains. Each time a company digs up a Boston street, they are responsible for repairing it when they're done. And crucially, the city has a 3-year warranty on every single one of those patches. According to city officials, about 10% of these patches go bad, cracking, crumbling at the edges, sinking, and they need to be repaired. When that happens, how do city officials know whether that particular patch is still under warranty? And if it is, what company is responsible for fixing it? That's where these guys come in. They are called A-tags, short for asphalt tags, and they are the centerpiece of the City of Boston's street repair tracking system. Though they are but little, about 1.5 inches in diameter, they are fiercely informative, if you know how to decode them. The year the patch was laid is marked at the center of each A-tag, so it's easy to quickly identify whether it's still under warranty. As for who laid each patch, city officials devised a color coding system. Now, big companies that do a lot of digging, they get their own custom colors, and they get to display their name on their A-tags.
National Grid, you're yellow. Boston Water and Sewer, you're blue. MWRA, you're light blue. Comcast and Verizon, you're orange. Eversource, you're red. I said the steam company, you're white.
Private contractors who work under the streets of Boston get a green A-tag with a unique ID number at the top. So all it takes is a quick look at a legend to know who did the job. A-tags have been required on every patch laid in the city of Boston since 2011, and companies can be fined if they don't embed their chip. The system has been a rousing success, according to city officials, who say the compliance rate is somewhere between 98 and 99%. As for that last 1 to 2%, now that you know the code, you too can be an inspector. If you see a failing patch in your neighborhood, call 311, or better yet, snap a pic and tweet it at boss311. So there you have it, the humble A-tag, an ace up the city's sleeve that keeps the odds high. The streets stay even. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and perhaps more importantly, ante up and let me know what you are curious about, because hey, I might just say, deal me in. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there.
The Curiosity Desk is sponsored by Emerson College, inspiring curiosity and creative expression in all of us.